Final Mile podcast on realagriculture.com is brought to you by Results Driven Agriculture Research. Find out more by going to ardar.ca. Looking forward to today's discussion for the Final Mile podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about artificial intelligence, AI. You can't go anywhere without somebody talking about it and tell you got to do this, you got to do that. Are you doing it? Well, there is a lot of opportunity in terms of artificial intelligence and the industry of agriculture. What that looks like may be different for every operation, but we're going to really dive into that today with somebody that spends a lot of their headspace in this sector. We're joined today by Mohamed Yaghi. He is the Vice President of AgExpert and Innovation Hub with Farm Credit Canada. How are we doing today, Mo?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you, and I appreciate you joining us here today for the Final Mile. Okay, so I guess let's start high. When we think about artificial intelligence and connect that to the industry of agriculture, how big of an opportunity is it for the industry?
So I personally think it's a massive opportunity, but I want to right-size the opportunity. At the moment, when we talk about artificial intelligence, I believe there's a bit of a cliche going around that artificial intelligence is going to answer every question that we have. It's going to help us unlock fortunes that we never had access to. I think in the long run, I think what the hype is about is the promise of that. But ultimately, where we're at right now, we have a few, you never know the scale of development these days. We have a few months or a few years ahead of us before we can reach those heights of maybe that promised land that everyone is talking about that peak efficiency. But at the moment, what we see right now is, again, artificial intelligence is a promising tool, especially when it comes to large language models. But ultimately, at the end of the day, artificial intelligence, at least in my opinion, is advanced statistical pattern recognition. It's the ability to use data to detect patterns that aren't really discernible to the naked eye or would take years for us to really uncover in a way or through a model that would help us pick out those patterns. So essentially, artificial intelligence today is going to help us immensely moving forward, but it's the type of artificial intelligence that we're implementing. And it definitely differs, especially when it comes to farms, on the type of operation they run. And it really differs based on the advantage, or when I say advantage, it's really the key strength of that farm. What do they rely most on? Is it predicting yields? Is it decreasing costs, and how do they decrease those costs, and what data do they use today to use that advantage to their within their operation? So it really matters on the type of farm, but then also how you approach it is just as important.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what are the benefits? Some people will say it reduces staff load, the amount of people you need, and depending on the industry. It's finding efficiencies, being more productive. It's actually crunching the data and coming up with, better decision-making tools. And I guess it could be all of the above. But for the industry of agriculture, what do you see as the benefit?
It depends on the operation. It depends on the type of data that a farm has already collected. And first off starts, and I know this tends to be a bit of a boring topic, but about data quality. And trust me, when I talk about data quality, I can see people just zoning out already, but it is important because it is the fundamental building block of any model you build. Think about it as the fuel you put in your car. If you're not putting a good type of fuel in your car, the pistons within your engine aren't going to operate. And when I look at data quality, especially in agriculture, I can't tell you how many times I've seen glyphosate spelled in a million different ways.
Right.
It feels like there is an unlimited amount of ways to spell glyphosate, but nonetheless, it really starts fundamentally with what type of information you collect. And let's maybe picture a dairy operation and you're focused on trying to decrease costs wherever you can. Maybe you have a robot. Maybe you are able to collect information about your staff and how they clock in and the amount of productivity each cow has. And where you're trying to zone in on the cost per cow ratio, it really depends on the information you collect today and the type of data that you collect. If you're able to collect all that information, you're already at an advantage because you're monitoring, you're collecting that information, you're able to see on a whole purview how your farm is performing. However, if you're not collecting that information at the moment, you may have a few months and years to actually really start using and leveraging those tools. But ultimately, it comes back to that key aspect of what you're doing today, because artificial intelligence is really going to highlight what you're doing already really well, as opposed to, again, wiping out whatever infrastructure you have and giving you a golden road to wherever you want to go. So it really starts off by small habits that turn into really good things in the future. And when it comes to large language models, the promise we see today, especially at Farm Credit Canada, with what we did last July with results-driven agriculture research based out of Alberta, was a collaboration on a new large language model called Root. Root today has been used by thousands of users. But what we're seeing right now is a lot of other jurisdictions around the world starting to use large language models in agriculture. Recently, I think last week, China announced its own open source large language model called Sinong. And basically, it's taken all extension service material and put it into one model to give farmers on the go information. So it's those sort of tools that are really going to be impactful. But we personally don't think large language models like Root are going to replace experts like agronomists, but agronomists who don't use those tools to their benefit may be losing out because others will be using it to their advantage.
Yeah, it does feel that we sometimes phrase this as like this all or none sort of scenario where it's sort of more what you just spoke about, which is okay, I need if I'm a farmer, I'm an agronomist, maybe I'm an ag banker. How do I use a tool like artificial intelligence to assist me to do my job to a heightened level, maybe more productive or better output, all those kind of things. That's the question a lot of us that are kind of elementary in this regard. That's the kind of question we should be asking. Not, how do I, how many people is this going to replace? That's jumping ahead steps that we really don't you don't have an answer to today.
Yeah, no, and I think it's also like it's actually in that regard, right? So when we look at machine learning, which is effectively a model learning how to complete a task over multiple attempts in order to become more accurate, I think I likened it to this video that was pretty famous online of a computer learning how to play Super Mario. The first go of it, it doesn't know how to do it because it doesn't understand the rules. But as time moves on and it understands the different rules and the different obstacles, it's able to complete different levels in record time. And think of it that way. A model needs to practice with a source of data that has high quality, but also it needs to understand the rules and the different obstacles over time. So when we're looking at a large language model like Root, for instance, we're building it from the ground up using whatever public resources we have, using trusted agricultural sources. And the hope and the ambition of it is to collect a lot of curated Canadian agricultural sources so we can give farmers, again, on the go, instant access to information that, again, would maybe take them a bit more time to find. So one example I like to use is looking at the crop guide in Ontario. It's a pretty dense manual. It can be over maybe 200 pages, but essentially by digitizing that manual, which what we're looking forward to doing in the future, we'll be able to give instant answers on the go to producers. And liken that also to, let's say, different grants that are available. Again, there's over 500 grants that farmers can apply to. Can they find all the 500 in an instance to find their eligibility? Maybe not. But essentially, if you ask this large language model the conditions of who you are, what your farm is, it can give you an instant answer. So it would be that first line of knowledge, essentially. Following that, again, it depends on the memory that a large language model has. It even maybe depends on who you work with with the subject matter expert. If they understand the basics or the fundamentals of your farm, they can use those tools using existing data to help you make better decisions. And they're going to find insights for you. It's never going to be a way of you got to change the whole way you operate you manage your operations. No, I think it's going to ultimately be small nuggets of information that you may not have really seen before, and then building upon that, so you increase that strength throughout the duration of your use of that tool. But again, things are changing so fast, but it's what we're providing right now is an entryway to using AI tools like a large language model in a safe manner, in a safe environment, where there's not really, again, a lot of your own financial data pending any sort of analysis. It's really just helping you understand what are the limitations of these tools, but then also helping you get access to information more quickly.
Very, very qualitative observation on my part. Okay.
Yeah.
Been speaking to farm and agribusiness audiences across Canada and the US. And it's the
Yeah.
same on the same kind of plane here. Is there are very early adopters, way beyond even what I'm playing around with, or probably maybe even you too.
Yeah.
Okay. Then there is a much larger group, I think, that are kind of like sort of skeptical, like and sort of haven't dipped their toes. And the longer it takes them to dip their toes, probably the more of a barrier it all becomes, right? I really don't know how big the middle is in this regard. Do you have any sense of if you were to break down the users in agriculture of artificial intelligence tools, how they break out? Have I
No,
described it correctly, or is it different?
yeah, I would say it's an interesting question because it really depends on the type of tool, right? And sometimes we may be using these tools without our own, again, we might not realize we use these tools, right? So I think, let's say with something like, let's say Copilot or ChatGPT, I think everyone's dabbled at least once, just explored what it is. But when we look at people using it for their operations on a consistent basis, we see different levels of use. Do you use these tools for, let's say, administrative work? We're seeing a huge increase in that. A lot of, again, early adopters aren't only early adopters. We see middle users on those applications as well, just to write emails, just to maybe give daily reminders of different events that we have to keep track in our calendar. So we're seeing that as well. But also, it differs when it comes to the application of it. So you may not use artificial intelligence for agronomy decisions, but you may use it for, let's say, operational or staff decisions based maybe to create a schedule, right? So the use cases differ across the pool of early adopters differs across each application. So ultimately, what we see is on an administrative front, we see a lot of farmers using it already, and we're trying to encourage farmers when it comes to more bigger stake decisions, like, let's say, your finances, when it comes to like agronomy decisions, to not only rely on what the first answer output it is, and I believe as an instinct nobody does, but what are those tools that are in use right now, leveraging their own information to help them gain better insights? We see a smaller pool of adopters using those tools right now, and it's more experimental than anything else.
Yeah, I heard an artificial intelligence presentation. I went to a workshop a couple weeks ago, and the workshop leader, one of the things that he was big on is tool for purpose. Like some of the applications are better at some things than others. So,
Sure.
an example, not to really get wonky here on everybody, but financial number crunching. Claude was what he had said, but that's the place to be.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you're doing simple asking, what restaurant I should go to, or maybe you're creating an image, Gemini seems to be the leader
Yeah.
right now when it comes to image creation. It's crazy. But tool to purpose is one of the things that he was big on.
Oh, 100%. Tool to purpose is, I think, absolutely where everyone should be looking at it right now. And I think moving forward, what I think more fundamentally is important is, again, the pool of information you have on your farm, and then trying to get that tool for purpose associated with the data that you have. So let's say, for instance, Claude is a great example for financial analytics, and its application to, let's say, Excel is really powerful. So if you have a lot of data that is already stored in Excel, you can apply extensions from Claude into your Excel to help you leverage those insights. Again, you have to be careful and cautious about what those insights are outputted as, because you might not know how the model is built, and you never want to have what we call a black box, which is basically there's an answer that's just outputted and just trust that answer from the get-go, but have your advisor help you set that up to make sure that it is realistic and it makes sense. And then you'll also have, again, an instinct to it. But moving forward, where the industry can go and where it could go in the future is when you're interacting, and I think interoperability is going to be a huge thing in the future. What we're seeing in the industry right now is a few select companies are starting to build moats around their data hubs. So essentially, you have to pay in order to exchange your data out of that system to share with other platforms. And that's a huge burden for a lot of producers because it's as if you're paying for a pizza, paying to leave the pizza parlor with your pizza, and then being charged to share those slices of pizza with your friends. And that's not really an effective way of increasing your ability to understand your data because different platforms have value, again, tool to tool, right? So each platform has its own distinct strength. And what we're seeing right now, and this is something where we're pushing back, is in order to have that interoperability, and it's going to give you more insights because different platforms collect different information.
Right.
But ultimately, you as a producer should have the ability to join all those data sets together, to have a universal hub within your grasp in order to ask questions of data from any hub that you store data into so that they can give you those insights. Again, you have to test it slowly, but that's where the future is going. And some companies are trying to push back against that.
When we look at the industry historically, we've had a lot of major technological advancements that have really changed the way that we do things.
Yeah.
Okay, there's lots. Where do you think this one will fit?
This one will fit within it's not going to be the combine, the invention of the combine, I think, but it will rank just below that, because all the information that we're able to get and gather right now, I don't believe has had the use case applicable for it to increase food production by, again, multiples of X factors, whatever you want to add to it. But it is going to help us be more effective in this world where costs are increasing. And I think that's the big insight that we're seeing right now from our users. Again, input costs are rising, as you already know. How do you manage all those, again, input costs along with your increasing expenses on your farm? Artificial intelligence tools will help enable us to not only track it, inhibit us from maybe like making extra purchases or warning us of different growth areas on our farm, but it'll also help us to scale those strategies forward. And I think that's the effectiveness of these tools. Is it going to inform us about how the best agronomy decisions? Right at this moment, I don't think so. But will it help us get access to more information faster? 100%, and it already is. Will it help us decrease our administrative burden? 100%. What artificial intelligence, especially with large language models, will do is help us increase our mental capacity to focus on operations as opposed to, again, filling out an application. It'll help us get time back. And I think that's one of the most important things. So that's where I would rank artificial intelligence at the moment. The use case when it comes to agricultural use of AI to, again, increase food production by X-fold isn't there just yet, but there are different things happening behind the scenes at the moment that may show otherwise. But with different OEMs and the technology they're introducing right now, utilizing artificial intelligence, let's say using neural networks like John Deere See and Spray, that can have an impact, of course. Yeah. But that's where we're seeing the technology grow into its own at the moment within agriculture.
Are you at all concerned as we advance here, people's ability or lack of need to apply like experience or thinking? So like, I'll just give you an example. So, and you and I are kind of roughly the same age. We have experiences prior to artificial intelligence. When we see the output, we're able to apply that experience, that knowledge to the output and be like, well, that's really good. Or that is not very good. We got to start over here. We got to improve the prompt or whatever we're doing.
Yeah.
If you don't have that experience, because all we hear about is like, assistant paralegals, assistant copyright, junior copywriters, like it's all these junior positions wiped out. I'm not sure where people are going to get the experiences from. They're not going to have the experience to apply. Maybe at some point the output is so good we won't have to worry about this. But locked in here in 2026, some of the output needs to be questioned. It's not perfected. Are you worried here we kind of lose that skill of like just that there's probably a type of thinking this is called, but just to be able to apply that?
It's like failing fast, right? To iterate, right? To like, and you learn from those experiences for sure. I think I'll answer it in two different ways. I think on the one hand, again, technology has always come. Agriculture's not been a stranger to technology and technological advances. So whenever, let's say the self-driving combine eliminated 10 jobs, for instance,
Yeah.
right? So we're used to those changes on the farm. On the flip side, when it comes to those experiences, while anecdotal, are still a data point, right? So I think of it more as we're just documenting that experience into a model so that it can again refine our thinking moving forward. But no model is going to be successful without that experience, right? And I think that's the important part. So when it comes to precision agriculture, it's really going to have to depend on that experience being documented, because if it's stuck in our brains and not documented, it's those models won't be helpful. But it's really scaling that experience. So maybe it goes back to my first point, which is what's the strength that you have on your farm? It's that experience, right? That experience of understanding what yields you might get. What is the scenario of the year that might happen depending on how much rain, growing days that you get? You have an instinct, right? But it's just really documenting that instinct, but then challenging your assumptions as well, because you may be going into it thinking one way, but the data might be saying something different. So it challenges those assumptions. And I think being challenged on those assumptions is healthy. For me, what excites me most is being challenged on those conclusions or those assumptions that I deem to be true, and then being told that you might have to think differently about it, because it improves my experience then looking at that data as well. So I would look at it from that lens too.
Yeah. Any insights on how we predict or how we've seen the end customer, the consumer, react to the use of artificial intelligence when it comes to food production? Do they see it as a positive, or do they see it because we've had challenges with technological advancements in food production in the past where the consumer pushes back? Is this one seen more positively because they're using some of these same tools themselves?
I can't speak about food consumers per se, but what I can say about what the data says right now is this huge shift that we had maybe in from the 2010s to like the late 2020 to the late 2010s, I guess. There was a huge health craze. When I say health craze, it was really based on information that might not have been true. Let's say alternative dairy, like milk sources, for
Yeah,
instance.
yeah.
And we're seeing a huge swing back to non-processed foods or less processed foods. And I would say, looking at the data and looking at the inflection point about the use of artificial intelligence, this still has to be studied. But again, based on my experience, which has to be corrected by data, I would say that food consumers are able to actually ask questions on the go, taking images of food and asking whether or not it's healthy. And that having access to that information ultimately would be better for agriculture, because that data is going to say whether or not that process, let's say, again, when it comes to sustainability, we can already see in China a 10% increase in requests from consumers for more sustainable food. But when you look deeper into the data, most of that consumer demand is coming from foods that are not processed or more naturally made. And that's what consumers are demanding for, not only in China, but also across North America. There is less processed food. So when you look at alternative proteins, they're highly processed. But ultimately, what consumers are looking for nowadays is less processed food, more access to healthier proteins as well. So again, it's a balance. And those alternative foods that we saw a few years ago, maybe a decade ago, is becoming much more of a niche market now. So I would say artificial intelligence has had a role, but again, the data, again, this is my assumption based on the limited data I have access to.
Yeah. From a we've seen a huge amount of advancement in these tools in like, well, last 2 weeks or 6 months. Like
Yeah.
this thing keeps on changing. Like
Yeah.
it's that's the hard, that can maybe a little bit of the intimidating part here. What is the trajectory? What does this look like? Do you have like you're talking and listening to some of the real the real thinkers in this area of artificial intelligence? What are you hearing in terms of where we're headed?
So I think in the next few months or years ahead, it will producers will have the ability to not necessarily need to do all their data analysis in one place. Uh, and when I say one place, it's they don't have to again put all their data into one platform. They can create and spin up their own servers where data can come from multiple data platforms they have access to. And then all they have to do is ask questions of this platform that they create internally on their own infrastructure. And it's called an MCP server technically, but basically a farmer can just get all the data just through API calls, which is basically how different platforms share information with each other. But they can spin up their own server, virtual server in one place, but have the different data points and the different technologies they use going to one location. And what they can do then is ask questions of it. So let's say, for instance, they have a question about finances and the impact of those financial decisions on their agronomy. It can give them an answer. Again, the trust of those answers is going to only come through the help of subject matter experts, through their advisors. But it's how do you build a network of advisors who can help you build that infrastructure up, but then also support the ongoing use of it, because it's going to depend on, as we said, experience to validate those figures. So that's where I'm seeing things go. It's going to take a while, and it's going to be different from farm to farm. But ultimately speaking, when it comes to trying to get a distinct advantage, it fundamentally comes from collecting that information in the first place.
Yeah.
If you're not digitizing at the moment, you may be behind. And we're seeing that people, again, when it comes to AgExpert, for instance, just that first year alone, when you digitize your records, you increase productivity by 7%, which is just an amazing figure. But alternatively, when you look at Root, it's taking manual tasks out of your day. And we're looking at more ways to increase the confidence in the information that is provided to farmers, but then also how can we help them avoid the churn of administrative tasks? So we're focusing on ways to help them write grants faster. So it's these tools, it's these small things that are going to really benefit producers in the future. And it's the trust that these small things will grow over time, and not that these tools will instantly work. We have to accept there's going to be a failure rate in it from the get-go. But it's our interaction with it that it's going to be successful.
Yeah.
So that's where we see things moving at the moment. And with FCC and what we're doing, at least from the Root angle, we're trying to keep things as open source as possible. So we also want Canadian innovators in the ecosystem to come to us so we can help them, because we're here to be a catalyst for the sector and not just mark our part of the market. It's really to help other innovators. If they want a large language model, how can we help them? And so they're not going back to the same sources that we're going back to. We can just share it with them and create an open ecosystem where information is shared freely.
Yeah, just jumping back to the consumer for a second, I was thinking, like, do we, with change comes opportunity, and do we see, like, we see with strawberries, hand-picked strawberries? Do we see, like, strawberries grown without robotics, or like, you know what I mean? Like, I think this is kind of an opportunity in both streams, and not that there's just two streams, but there's a multi-stream approach here for farms to take advantage or not take advantage of these kinds of tools. I think the mass takes advantage of the tools because there's such an opportunity here, and the benefits are very promising. I think that's we're not all the way there, and in some cases we are. Like I was reading where this thought leader in the area of AI was talking about how we're almost to the point now where when you read something, somebody types you an email, we automatically assume at this point it's artificially intelligent generated. Like even if somebody actually did type it, we now assume that, yeah, AI did this.
No, totally. And I think but to be, not to be play devil's advocate for a second, but like we have been incrementally getting to this point. Like let's say, for instance, even having Grammarly as an extension on our web browser to
Yeah.
correct our grammar, that was again use of artificial intelligence to correct our spelling. Right. When it comes to Excel, when we start developing models or using macros in Excel, that was the early stages of artificial intelligence, right? So we have been building up to this point, but where the real benefit comes in is when we look at generative AI, for instance, it's helping us collect all this information, and hopefully we will get it from sources that are trusted, especially for root, but from other sources as well. But when it comes to again, consumers, they're getting access to information, and this is a huge opportunity, I think, and believe for ag, because when it comes to consumers, I know a lot of folks are using agents now to craft their diet, right? They can take pictures of their food and then can ask the agent, hey, what should I eat next to keep my calorie deficit low, right? And it'll recommend healthier items, right? That are less processed. That's the expectation. So that's where a huge opportunity comes in. When it comes to just again operational opportunities for producers, it's really coming in from that generative aspect of creating new information. So let's say, for instance, when it comes to administrative tasks, I've heard so many times from farmers across the country how long it takes to fill out forms, how long it takes them to
Yeah.
fill grants.
Oh, I hate paperwork.
Oh, we don't we all, right? So it helps us reduce the burden of that. But then where can we get that, take the opportunity of that mental energy, and where can we reapply it? So that's the opportunity I see from the get-go here.
Yeah. So what concerns me though
Hmm.
is the way you describe that makes so much sense. Okay, like I am all in with you on this. It does describe some of the models though as if it's like it's pure. Because I think back and I'm skeptical
Hmm.
that that's how the world works, right? Where a lot of times we have obviously there's political slants, but they're also from a food perspective. What if everybody's a lot of consumers are using an AI tool that they think is giving them good information, but the scripts are all written to push people to like this is healthy food, and we all know in agriculture that well that's just a load of crap, right?
Yeah.
I think back to when social media first came out. It was all
Yeah.
about the opportunity here is everybody's going to get all sides of the story. We're going to be more informed, and it's going to be all like this utopian like information gathering for humans across the world. The opposite happened, Mo. The opposite. People
So,
echo chambered more than ever. So how do we make? Do you
you
see
know
my,
what?
my concern?
That's a fair call out, and I think that's actually really fair. And maybe I am looking at it from a very utopic angle, but what gives me confidence is, as opposed to social media where the data output is human generated, here again it's model generated, and of course it could be skewed. Again, there's a ton
Yeah,
of things that can go wrong, 100%, and there's no doubt about it. I think again with what we saw at the early onset of social media was something pure, right? So right now we're in that period of something pure where the models are being generated. They haven't been skewed to the degree to which a political agenda can be applied.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I was in the Middle East during the Arab uprising in 2010 and 11, right? Like where social media was like again the promised land of like we're going to have more democracy, and the opposite totally happened. Yes, totally hear that. But again, what I think right now is if the right parties come to the table and are able to start leveraging those models, especially within agriculture, where we can have a say, like what we're seeing with Root, for instance, where we would love to get more assistance from others in the industry, more partnerships, like what we have with Ardar at the moment. We can build those models. We have the opportunity to build it. It's a blank slate for us, right? So we have that huge opportunity right now, but we also have the opportunity to help others in the sector as well. So ultimately, when we see, again, China coming out with their own large language model based on thousands of sources, we should be doing the same. And that's what we're trying to do right now with Root, but we're trying to work with different organizations across the
Right.
country to give curated information like that. So it's up to us to take the challenge on and to take the moment. Sometimes we're maybe too slow, but I think in this instance, we have a real opportunity to go in the front of the line and really take hold of that opportunity.
And we can take this last question and apply it to the farmer audience, or it can be ag
Yeah,
business
sure.
too, whatever. But the this podcast is called the Final Mile, so I thought I would ask you, like, so for that final mile, for us to really achieve here and execute on the potential and really take advantage of this opportunity, what 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 does the industry of agriculture need to do here for the final mile?
I think there's one philosophical one and maybe one practical one. Philosophically, and when I say philosophically, it's not that intense, but
Yeah.
it's really you need to iterate with these tools and models. The more information you can apply to it, and you have to make sure the environment you apply this information to is a environment where the model is using your information exclusively, or using curated sources that you trust, and that's where it's going to be fundamental. But is going to help you, but you have to accept the fact that it's not going to be perfect from the get-go, and you can't trust those insights immediately. What it's going to require is, again, months of, again, testing it, seeing, iterating, failing fast. If we can adopt this mindset to this, it will help us. We shouldn't be applying it to our agronomy decisions at the moment, even financial decisions. But over time, with more information, you can have a really useful tool to have within your discussions with your experts, with your advisors on the farm. Let's say, for instance, I want to buy a new piece of land. It's 5,000 acres. It's priced at X dollars per acre. I want to see if this new piece of land will actually increase my profitability. It may come back saying, based on current metrics of your own operations, it may not be the best purchase. It might not increase your profitability. It might decrease it. You have to accept, but that's the interaction that you need to have with the tool. And then you have to find a way to increase that profitability. So you can ask questions like the so what questions, those scenarios with it as well. So I think that's the promise of it. So it's like enabling yourself to fail fast and to iterate, because these tools are going to be, again, they're going to be everywhere. And they already are everywhere. So it's more about how do you accommodate and start using those tools and understanding its potential. And it starts by those small experiments. So experiment small, fail small as well. On the flip side, I would say when it comes to, so I have the philosophical, but then also the fundamentals and the final mile. If you were meeting me at the final mile at the end of it, I would say when it comes to the information you collect today, please don't put it in a yellow notepad. I have met so many folks who just keep their information in a yellow notepad. Look, I get it. I really do. I have arguments as well with my father, for instance, about keeping stuff in a notepad. It drives me nuts sometimes. But if you digitize it, there's a record there, not only for your own operation, but for generations to come. It's all stored in one location. But you can look at the pattern year over year, right? And then see what has worked certain years, depending on the weather. Again, and even like the specific spray, the spray schedule that you have on your farm, it might not apply year to year, right? So it gives you the flexibility to look into the past. But it's that data quality that's going to be so important, because if you want to leverage these tools, you fundamentally need to have the building blocks in place to make sure that it is effective. And then lastly, and this is to an industry, on an industry-wide scale, collaboration is more important than ever. Whether it's interoperability between platforms or by partnering, let's say with what we did with Root and Ardar. Partnerships are going to be more crucial than ever, because we shouldn't have information behind paywalls. We should have it within open source mechanisms where anybody can access it, but we can have innovators as well, not have to build from the ground up. We should be giving everyone a leg up in this environment, because there is the opportunity to do so. So I'll see you at the next mile, I guess.
Great stuff. Well, Mo, really appreciate your insights. All the best to you with some of the work you're doing here with Root and trying to expand its capabilities. Really appreciate you joining us here for the Final Mile podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Final Mile podcast on realagriculture.com is brought to you by Results Driven Agriculture Research. Find out more by going to ardar.ca.